This is a short introduction to how communication between browser and server takes place. The browser, or the front end, has all the HTML, CSS and JavaScript, whereas the server has the PHP or other scripting languages, and then perhaps a database. The communication between the browser and the server can be viewed as a request and as a response. When the user asks for a file or a page on a server, we call it a request. And then the server perhaps use some PHP to blend in some dynamic or some functions or call to a database server or whatever it may be, and then responds to the browser or sends some output back to the browser. It will be plain HTML what comes back again from the server when we view this as a regular or normal request response. Let's have a look at a short example. We have a contact form or contact page in our site, and we want to send this contact form, the content of it, to a PHP page or a file on the server. So we send a request, and this request holds all the information, all the data from the contact form. And this request can have two types. It can be either a GET request or it can be a POST request. The difference between these two is that the data is visible in the URL. That means in the menu, in the address in the browser when we use GET, and the data is invisible when we use POST. We use GET when we don't need any security, for example in searches, and we use POST when we want to hide the data from the user or perhaps from a hacker. For example, if we want to log in, we don't want to expose the username and the password in the URL, or in a contact form we don't want to expose what we have sent in the URL as well. So let's have a look at a small example. We want to send this request, and this is a contact form with just a name, an email, and then a message. And when we click this button, we go to the PHP page, and on the PHP page it will display what has been sent, and we mix it with some HTML and just write full name and a colon in front of what the user had entered into the full name input field, and as well as the email and the message. Let's have a look at the code. The contact HTML page contains a form, and a form is what holds all these input fields. We can have several forms on a page and in a file, but in this case we only have one, and it's a quite simple one. We have this first name and last name, and then we have the input field, full name. We have a label for the email, and we have a label for the message, and the message is typed into a text area, not an input field. The difference between a text area and an input field is that the text area can contain more characters, so it's possible to write comments or descriptions or whatever it may be. And then in the bottom we have this submit button. So let's just run through them. We have an action in the form, and the action tells the browser which page to contact or which page to send this content. We use the method POST because we want to hide the data from the browser, or we do not want to expose it. Then we have this input field. It's a type of text. The name is full name. That means we can retrieve the value of this input field on the server with the name full name. And so goes for the email field. If we want to retrieve the data on the server, we need to specify a name, and in this case it is email. And for the text area, it has of course also a name. If we don't specify a name, the data will not be sent. So we specify a name here, and it's message. Then we have the trigger down here. That is the button that the user can click. If we don't have a submit button, we're not able to send the form. On the server side, or in the PHP page, we get the posts, the content of this form, and we can retrieve it via the $_posts, which is a super global. It's an array that holds all those input fields that has been sent in a form. So we make 3 variables from these values of the form. We have the $full name, we have the $email, and the $message, and then we can output or display the values of the variables in the 3 echo lines, where we mix the full name with the variable, the value of the variable, and then a break just to have these 3 lines above each other. When we send something to a server, for example a form, and we send it to a PHP page, it's possible for us to have a look at what data was sent, and we can see that if we go to our inspector. In this case I use the inspector in Chrome, and the form data, as you can see down here, has been sent as we specified in the form. And as you can see, we also have the 4th input field, which is not an input field, but it's kind of an input field because it's called input and then has the type submit, and I gave it a name, submit, and it has a value, send message, in the button. So if we want to find out what has been sent to the server, we can always go to the inspector and then go to network and then headers, and then scroll down and find the form data section, and then view what has been sent. The difference between post and get can be seen as this. This is 2 identical forms, except the method is different. The first one is post and the second one is get. So let's see what happens when we click the submit button in these 2 forms. First, let's have a look at the post form. The post form looks like this, like before. It has the address in the URL, and it has these 3 values displayed. When we have a look at the get form, it's kind of different because we can display, of course, all the data we want. We can retrieve the full name, the email, and the message. But in the URL, something happened, something is different, and that's what I'm talking about when I talk about exposing what has been sent. Because we put a question mark, or the browser puts an question mark after sendmail.php, and then the browser displays the name of the input field and an equal sign, and then the value of the input field, and then all the input fields are separated with an ampersand or an and sign. So when we scroll to the right, we can see that everything is now in the URL, and that is kind of practical in some cases, but it is primarily in these cases where we want to, when it's not security we care about, because we want to give the user perhaps the possibility to change the URL or use the URL in some way, then we use the get. Like in Google, when we want to search for something, for example this, when to use get and post, and when I click search, I can see that the URL is now filled with all the values that has been sent. And in this case, I have q equals when to use get and post, which in the Google case is that Q stands for question or query. So this will be the place to, if you want to use Google in some way, you can send a request to google.com/? Q equals and then your search. So just to sum it up, we use get when we don't care that much about security, for example in searches, and post we use that when we want to be secure, for example in logins or contact forms.